people in here right now. My name is Marty Smith, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs at ASUI. A couple weeks ago, Henry Ann, the League of Women Voters, approached us about doing a voter education panel. Just spread awareness about some of the new laws that are coming up this year, and just kind of get the vote out among students for both the primaries and in November. And so we're really lucky to have not only ASUI here, but also the League of Women Voters. And I look forward to having some really awesome remarks by some really awesome people tonight. I'll hand it over to Henry Ann, and thank you guys a lot.
Thank you, Martha. I just want to say how great it's been to work with ASUI on putting this partnership together today. They run a great ship. I've been to a couple of their meetings, and they run a great meeting, so kudos. So tonight we are very fortunate to have 3 panelists to talk about elections. And Blaine Eccles, our Dean of Students, is going to have a few words for us in a little bit. And Julie Fry, our elected county clerk, will talk to us about new voter laws. And Bryce Blankenship is on the city council here in Moscow, and he's going to address civic engagement and the importance of students being engaged in their community. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to turn it right over to Bryce. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Hi everybody, thanks for inviting all of us. Thanks for hosting the panel, and it's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. As mentioned, my name is Bryce Blankenship, and I was elected to Moscow City Council last election cycle in November. I was sworn in early January, so I've been on Moscow City Council for about 4 months now, and really enjoying kind of the steep learning curve that exists with getting into this space. I'm very excited about it. And one of the things that I was excited about running last fall and now being on City Council is my full-time job is I teach philosophy here at the University of Idaho. And I've been involved with the University of Idaho for over a decade as an instructor, as a lecturer, as a grad student, even over a decade ago. And so I think that I bring a really nice perspective to City Council, especially as it relates to engaging with students and kind of understanding students' needs, students' participation, both kind of in the classroom, out in Moscow, out in the world a little bit, that I've got a little bit of a pulse on that. And so it feels good, and it feels dutiful to be able to represent that hopefully well on City Council. Some of you might have heard this before, whether that be in a class of mine. I'm looking at Tanner over here. He's taken a bunch of classes from me and with me. But often what I say in class is I tell students and I encourage students, get to know the town that you live in, right? And Moscow, clearly, with being a 4-year institution, most students are here anywhere between 4 years, but maybe 4, 5, 6, maybe a little longer, maybe a little bit shorter, 1, 2, right, they move on. But I'm very passionate about encouraging students to get involved and get to know the town that they live in. Because I think that one thing, especially like just seeing the cool things that Moscow does and seeing the cool events that the city either hosts or co-sponsors or at least just, helping facilitate. We've got Renaissance Fair coming up in a couple of weekends. It's like events like that just to encourage people and encourage students in particular that Moscow is a very vibrant community. And I think that sometimes students very much have this kind of living on an island mentality or living kind of up isolated from the town, right? It's so daunting to go down and get a cup of coffee from One World, or it's, a big adventure to go out in the big city of Moscow. But I think once they actually take the 12 minutes and walk downtown, they're like, oh, this is really charming, right? In about 2 weeks, on the first Saturday of May, is the opening day of the farmers market, which I think is one of the best things about Moscow. And so I will definitely be stoked to tell and relay that to my students next week. You can definitely go check that out and kind of get involved there. Because I think for me, being passionate about Moscow, being passionate about the University of Idaho, is to make both kind of come alive, right? And to encourage students to participate in that space that makes both come alive more effectively, right? Because Moscow wouldn't be Moscow without the University of Idaho. The University of Idaho wouldn't be the University of Idaho without the city of Moscow. And so there is undoubtedly an inextricable connection. And encouraging students to see that, feel that, experience that is a role that I really like to play. And I get really stoked when I see students out in the world and they're like, oh, we heard about this in your class, or we heard somebody else mention this. And then they're like excited to be doing what it is they're doing. I'm like, well, that's great, like getting to know the town that you live in. And fully realizing that most students, won't necessarily maybe build a life here, won't really build kind of a home here after college, but really savoring the time that savoring the time that they experience here in Moscow, right? And really not taking it for granted and really kind of appreciating what Moscow can offer and kind of what the University of Idaho can offer. As it relates to civic engagement for students, and one thing that I've been kind of like, I put a little bit of a bug in a couple of people's ears about all the various commissions that the city of Moscow has. So Human Rights Commission, the Tree Commission, the Pathways Commission, there's a whole host of commissions, and they're always looking for students to participate on those commissions, right? So even though this doesn't necessarily connect with voting per se, but it is a really cool way to be able to see and understand what's going on in these various spaces that impact various places within Moscow. So I would definitely encourage, if you all have time, especially if you're maybe a sophomore or junior and you've still got some energy to be more invested in the community, looking at various commissions to potentially participate with would be a really good way to get involved. And most commissions do have like a specific designation for student engagement. So I'd be happy to help facilitate meeting if any students want to get involved in various commissions. And then lastly, just as it relates to voting, as it relates to participation, the first election that I was ever able to, I guess the first presidential election that I was ever able to participate in was in 2008. And I remember just being so excited to like actually get to the ballot, cast my ballot for the first time. And I was living in the Midwest, in a swing state in particular, so it felt maybe more like it mattered. But even when it doesn't feel like it matters, it does matter, right? To have your voice heard through that representation, it does matter to get involved in that world, whether that be on the very local level, whether that be on the state level or on the federal level. And so encouraging students and encouraging students to get registered, encouraging students to kind of be knowledgeable about the various candidates for the various positions. I think students in particular, and I put myself in these shoes, remembering what I was like as a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, like, you can get pretty apathetic, and you're like, I've got other things to worry about. I don't need to think about who's running for, state house or state senate, right? I'm just gonna go live my life how I wanna live it. I wanna go get Jimmy John's and live my life how I wanna live it, right? But actually spending 2 minutes to like learn a little bit about the candidates and to learn how they can represent you. And especially I think that students are much more attuned to a lot of things that are impacting their daily lives than I certainly was, and I think that that's clearly connected to social media and the way that we talk and kind of interface in a lot of different ways these days. So yeah, just encouraging students to vote, to get involved, and to know that their voices matter, and that their votes do matter, even at times when it feels maybe a little bit dejecting. But the only way that change comes about, in whatever way you would hope change to come about, is through participation, right? And so I encourage, in whatever that participation looks like, whatever that participation is for you, to actualize it, to participate with it. So did I answer some of the main points? Because I can keep going. Now I'm like on a roll. Now I'm just like feeling it. So I'm like, all right, let me tell you about some of the best things about Moscow. But you all know a lot of the best things about Moscow, and I'm happy to kind of share those with you all. And I'm excited again about the changing seasons, and especially like kind of the moment where graduation is coming up, and then there's going to be a whole new slew of students that come in the fall, and they're going to get to know Moscow for the first time, right? And so it's like, how can we make a really good impression, or how can students again get to know the town that they live in? Because I think that it's really important to feel a place of security, to feel a place of home, and to feel a place of connection. And I think Moscow is a really unique community that encourages a lot of connection in a lot of different ways, which I'm very proud to be part of and very proud to represent on City Council. So thank you for your time and listening.
So my name is Julie Fry, and I'm the Latah County Clerk. It's going to be really hard to follow Bryce, the professor, because he's a good talker. I'm one of those students Bryce was talking about that never left. So I came to Moscow to go to U of I in 1989, and 35 years later, I still love it here. So we never left. I got elected in 2022, and so I've been the clerk about 15 months, and this job has a huge learning curve. Like maybe in 4 years I might know more. So I am not an expert by any means on elections, but my election director, Nancy, is here. And she definitely, if I can't answer it, then Nancy can. But we just spend a lot of time, like in Idaho code, everything we do as a county clerk, everything you do as a county elected official is written out in Idaho code, and that's what you have to do. So one of the biggest changes that went into effect January 1 of this year is you can no longer use your student identification for voting. So that's, if you're an Idaho resident, you have an Idaho driver's license, but the address is at Latah County, then you're gonna have to prove your residency to vote in Latah County. But you can always request an absentee ballot. And so Nancy made this really nice flow chart to sort of help you decide like how you can vote, because voter participation is extremely important, and we want everybody to have the opportunity to vote, whether that's requesting an absentee ballot from your home location or getting the required documents you need to vote here in Latah County. Anyway, other ways to get involved. Oh, no, an important deadline. So this Friday is the last day for online voter registration, and you have to be registered if you want to request an absentee ballot. And the last day for that is May 10th. So after the online voter registration ends on Friday, you can come into the courthouse. You can do in-person voter registration. So that's still an option. But you wouldn't be able to request that absentee ballot. So that's an important deadline to keep in mind. If you want to get involved in elections, we are always looking for poll workers. So you could come to the Latah County Courthouse and say you want to be a poll worker, or you can also do it at the Secretary of State's website. You can sign up to be a poll worker. That's a great way to get involved, learn about the process. If you're interested in voter registration drives, I know there's been some going on up here. We would love it if you would come in first and have a conversation with us so that those voter registration cards are actually gonna be valid and filled out properly, so you're not just doing a whole bunch of work for naught. I don't know, I don't have much more to say. We haven't got our briefing yet on any changes that went to the legislature yet this year. Can you think of anything?
Not anything major that would, directly affect
Right.
voting, just the student thing.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's legislation that's gone through, but not that directly affects what we're here for tonight, I guess.
Yeah, the only thing that went through the legislature this year that I'm aware of is they got rid of the August election.
Oh, right, yeah.
So now Idaho is down to just 2 elections a year, May and November, because the prior year they got rid of March's election. Yes?
Yeah, I was just thinking it might be important for students to kind of understand that when they come, their interest is primarily, I think, in the general election, not the primary.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for the general election, they're coming back to school and they have changed their address, and that's not indicated on their paperwork. Can they vote?
Yeah, what we'll need is just documentation, and that is actually on the back of my flow chart, shows what we'll need. Now, a lot of them don't get utility bills or anything like that, but if you have a bank statement with your address on there, it can prove, but you have to be an Idaho resident for that. If you are a Utah resident, you have a Utah ID, you are going to have to request an absentee ballot from Utah Secretary of State. Use that as an example. So in order to vote in Idaho, you must have an Idaho driver's license or state issued ID.
Or a passport.
No,
U.S. passport?
that doesn't indicate whether or not.
Well, you just
can
have to prove
register,
residence.
but-
Yeah.
Right, you still have to have that documentation to show that you live here in Idaho. The passport itself doesn't secure your ability to vote. You have to have that extra documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said if you have an Idaho driver's license with an address on it, but what if your address is wrong on your driver's license?
Then you
Can you
just have
still
to.
register to vote with that, or do you have to get that changed before you register to vote?
You can still register to vote with that license, but then you have to prove residency. So that like, whether our residency requirements so that we know you're a Latah County voter.
Okay, I thought that the law said that you had to have a current Idaho driver's license, so that to me means that it's gotta have the right address on it.
Well, if you move across town, you're still Latah County, but you haven't gotten your address changed yet. That's when the verification of residency comes into play,
Okay,
yeah.
so,
Or if you move from Coeur d'Alene to Moscow, you're still an Idaho resident. That's where, the proof of residency again, you would have to register in Latah County, obviously, and then you'd have to prove your residency.
okay,
So,
okay.
So if the driver's license, if the address on your driver's license matches your real address, that's when you can register online. And you don't have to have any checks. But if your address doesn't match, we get a flag, you get a letter, and it says you need to come in and verify your residence with us. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Yes?
I just want to put out there as a piece of info. I know that the residence halls, and we're gonna talk about it, the green communities can do this, but they'll be issuing address verification letters, next year, so that, folks in the res hall or, hopefully the green communities can actually verify or have documentation to register.
and that's good, but, I mean, even for like this year, if you can't do that for, next year, you guys sign documentation that they're in the residence halls, correct? Like a contract of some sort?
They have something on their manual ID that'll show that they live in the
Yeah.
residence halls.
Yeah.
It's online, and it has a thing that says their address
So
on
if
it.
they can print off like it's like a lease, to correlate that, a lease would actually work as well. So if there's a contract, with our elderly folks who live in the homes, they have a contract when they move in, that contract will, as long as it shows their name and the address that they're at, and then the signature, so that works. So if in residence halls, when they enroll, if they've got something, name, address of the residence hall, and then the signature stating, that it's not just pulled offline and filled out, right? That would actually work. So, and I don't know if you guys give them a copy of that, the students?
It's electronic is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's fine, I mean, and so if they printed it off, a lot of times we'll accept email form, comes through as a PDF, but you obviously can't do that on election day. But if we've sent you a letter, you get a hold of us and say, hey, can I send you a copy of my ID and the letter so we know who we're talking to? Then that can also work as verification.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, Idaho is offering a free ID, but the hard part of that is if you're from out of state, you have to give up your out-of-state identification to get the free ID. So keeping that in mind, and then always keeping in mind that sometimes if you were to give up residency and you're from out of state, you could put scholarships and stuff in jeopardy. So you always want to check that out too.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there still a plan, or is this a reoccurring plan to always have one polling location down at the SRC, the Student Rec Center? So,
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, in fact, we've moved more precincts down to the SRC to alleviate the crowding over at the fairgrounds, and the SRC was just really great to work with and give us more space.
Awesome. That's great for students. So,
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Speaking of the SRC, it was interesting because I was an observer for last year's election, and it was a wet, cold, rainy night, and there were a number of students who were so interested in voting that I watched them come and go 2 and 3 times to try and get all of this information correct so that they could actually vote. So I mean, I really, I appreciate you having this night, but you've only got a dozen students here, and there's going to be a huge demand after school begins to acquaint the students with all the new laws. Is there going to be another opportunity to have you here?
I think that would be a great idea to have, like I said, if you are having voter registration drives, to really come and seek us out first so we can give you the things you need so that you don't have that constant back and forth, and that they can come prepared with all the documents they need. But Mr. Eccles says he's gonna address that also.
Thank you, Julie. So Zena, excellent question. Zena's my neighbor down the street, by the way. It's good to see you. I'm glad you. I thought I might see you here. So I'm Glenn Eccles, Dean of Students, and I've been here it'll be 9 years this July. And every student cycle, every 4 years, we have a major general election that gets a lot of students interested and whatnot. A couple of things I wanted to say, and then Zena, I'll circle back around on your particular question, is it is easy for students to feel disenfranchised in our society. They don't feel laws that are being passed are relevant. They feel that no one's listening, and why bother? Because I'm just throwing a pebble into the ocean and it's not gonna do anything. And I always challenge students on that. I always participate in our elections. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and you have to be in the game. You have to have your voice heard, and that is absolutely one of the ways that is protected by our Constitution for you to have your voice heard. And so when you choose not to participate in elections because you feel disenfranchised, the other side, whomever that other side is gonna win. They're always gonna win if you choose not to participate. So I strongly encourage students to do that. The greatest thing students can do and ASUI can do to help facilitate participation is by doing it yourself, wearing your I vote sticker, and encouraging people to get registered to vote. I work with a lot of international students. They're like, why do I even bother? Why is this relevant for me? I'm not from this country, I can't even vote. But you can participate in campaigns, you can volunteer, you can do a lot of things to help facilitate other people voting, especially folks that might want to vote the way that you want to. So you have a lot of ability, whether you're able to vote or not, to really influence the election. And we work very closely with Henry Ann to bring the elections back on campus when they were away to make it easier for students to access. And so yes, as long as I'm here, I want to facilitate maintaining that ability to make it easier for students to vote. It is important for students to know if they live off campus though, if they live across town, they may not be able to vote in the SRC. So that's why it's important for them to register and get connected, because they get notified of where to vote. I work here at the university, spend half my life here all year round, but I vote somewhere else. I vote at the fairgrounds, even though it's more convenient for me to vote here on campus. So it's really important students actually do get registered to vote. I always encourage students to get informed and get in the game. That's really absolutely what it's all about. We might outgrow the SRC at some point. Parking is not conducive for the public to be there, but we'll always work. And Zena, to circle back around on your conversation, the general election really is our great opportunity here at the university to educate students about voter rights and why they want to get involved. I've been very pleased to see the voter registration drives that have already been happening. We work very closely, and while I can't speak for the student leaders in ASUI about what they're going to do next fall, I'm pretty confident that they're going to take this up and be really involved in turning out the vote. They do an amazing job of it every year, but especially when general elections come around, that is something that they work incredibly hard at doing. And I'm happy to help facilitate and be part of future forums like this to encourage more students and pay for more pizza to get more students to come, not just be the ASUI leaders, but we're hitting the end of the semester too, and a lot of students are getting little engagement fatigue, I think, a little bit. But next fall, I anticipate a lot more student involvement and awareness. And I tell students, get involved, get out there and make your voice heard. That's really important. And it's important to vote in non-general elections too. Local elections are absolutely, actually, almost even more important for students, because you can directly feel the impact in a lot of ways in regards to what that's like. And if you're angry and you're frustrated with what you see in society, good. You should be. Get out there and do something about it. Don't just talk about it, do something about it. Thank you for that. Erica, you had a question?
I think Zena's question mostly was, though, are you planning any special events, or are you gonna leave that up to the ASUI?
So it's an excellent question. It'll be a partnership. We don't have anything in the works at the moment, but that's because next fall. We're still trying to wrap up this semester. And so I'm highly confident our Department of Student Involvement and ASUI work very closely on doing that, and I'm very confident. We also have student clubs and organizations that usually get out and really get involved too. So those will be conversations with our new student leaders or our leaders that are returning for next fall that I can't speak for ASUI on that, but that is something that I know from the student involvement and the student affairs side, we do want to raise that awareness and opportunity. So we're just not there yet. We're still trying to get to finals here in a week and a half.
If I can chirp in on that, I mean.
Chirp away.
Yeah, in terms of, hosting events, and getting, engagement from students. Tabling is really the simplest, easiest, and most effective way to talk directly with students one-on-one. Getting them register to vote, getting them the information they need to know. Because they come on campus and in between classes you'll catch them walking around. Whereas hosting an event during the day they might have classes, or at night they might have homework or a club meeting or chapter meeting or whatever else. And so I won't be here next year, so this is all an outgoing.
Tanner's running for governor.
I'll be on the ballot next year actually. So that's if I give any advice to the future leadership over here, tabling's always I think we do some really good tabling drives for getting students out to vote. But that's what I have to say about that.
Healy.
I was one of the volunteers on the cold, rainy night when it was voting, and something to think about too is that while the student rec is really accessible for most students, I mean, we already have a lot of people that go to the rec. I will say where we were, it was not only cold, rainy, and just not great weather, it was really dark over there. So I don't know if there's anything, and I know we do the campus walks and the lighting, but there was really not a lot of lighting over there. So everyone that came over was really like, they already knew about it, but if there was a way we could light it up more so that people can see us, or they might be curious and come talk to us, I think that'd be really beneficial, because one, we should have more lighting on campus, but two, where we were located, because we did our own tabling event to kind of make sure we were ready to go before they went in, it was just really dark and there was not a lot of way to kind of pull people in.
And Haley, what you're referring to is the path that people have to walk around on the backside of the SRC to come in.
Yeah.
So that's something that we can absolutely work on. I don't see why we couldn't address that issue. Yeah, just remind me, or someone else remind me that's not graduating. In the fall.
I'll send you an email, Wayne. You don't want to hear from me? I'll send you an email.
Send me an email. They're in the back.
With regards to the tabling, one thing about tabling and getting people registered when you're tabling is that people often fill out their voter registration forms wrong. And if you're just giving them a voter registration form saying, fill this out, turn it into the county clerk, they're probably going to fill it out wrong. And if you do table, you have a chance to see them fill it out and say, no, you need to do this, 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 and this. So yeah, tabling is a good way to.
And I just want to reinforce what Julie said. It's really important that anyone that's going to do tabling and encourage registration to come in and get trained and talk about it, so that we have educated individuals to educate folks on how to register.
If I can comment on that, it's a waste of your guys' time if you don't have the knowledge. I'm willing to sit down with you. I sat down with a couple gals for an hour and a half and went over, tried to explain everything. The first time she came in and I took the registrations, she brought me 60 of them. Less than half of those were valid. So it's really important, and it's not a waste of our time to sit down with you guys and go over it so that you understand, so that you don't waste your time and the people registering. Knowledge is power, right? So we can get more voters registered if you guys are willing to come and sit down and do a little presentation and learn exactly what we need, especially the residence halls, the difference between physical and mailing addresses, things like that.
Would you be able to come on campus to do some of that training too, possibly?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem.
Great, thank you. Yes.
I have a question for Julie, actually. So I think all of us in the room know that we have to make it as easy as possible to get students registered, because people who are on the fence aren't going to do it if it's hard. If ASUI were to take a stance on really pushing students to go through the process of changing their address, getting the required forms, and voting as a Latah County resident, or requesting an absentee ballot from their home, wherever they live, which one would you recommend we really push more? Because it seems to me believe that the absentee ballot is an easier process to do rather than having to go through all of the hoops of voting in Latah. I'm curious what your opinion is on that.
I would definitely say just sticking with the absentee ballot unless there's a very important issue that you want to have your voice heard on in Latah County. Because, I mean, it just depends how long they think they're gonna stay here in Latah County and be engaged. Or the absentee process is very easy, it can all be done online.
Can I get on that? I mean, the more that I think about this, like, I think that question, like, there's an ease to it, but there's also a complication to it insofar as, you know, especially if we're engaging with, let's say, freshmen or sophomores, first years or second years, that'll maybe be here for 2, 3, 4 more years. Especially paying close attention to state races, right? So state legislature, state senate. And so having representatives from Latah County, from this region, representing them down in Boise, as opposed to potentially wherever they might be from in Idaho and representing them, right? So that that would maybe be an encouragement to get them to go through the rigmarole of like making sure that they can register here in Latah County to have their voice heard by the people running for this particular region, right? As opposed to if they're up here, but they're getting an absentee ballot from Idaho Falls, which is fine, but it's just like the different representation I think does matter probably in that capacity, depending on what values and stances students have on particular issues. So, and especially knowing that if students are gonna live here for the next 2, 4, 6 years, potentially making that move to actually like have their representative from Moscow, Latah County, the various districts that's around here, be actually representing them could be a benefit. So, that's my 2 cents on that question.
Henriette.
I just wondered, my concern is that a lot of students, the first day of class this year was August 27th, and pre-registration closes October the 11th. So you have a very narrow window to try to get in front of students and make them aware that they need to prepare and plan. And I really like the idea that Brandon Brackett had of connecting with the housing department and trying to get something in the students' hands early, because they're busy trying to find a job or get settled in their apartment, find their classes. Maybe they're moving here with their wife and baby, you know, living in student housing. It's so much on their mind. Is there any way we can put something maybe in an admission packet, or not sure how registration goes anymore? Because we've gone to Palooza Fest and they're really not interested in stopping by our table because there's way too many other stimulus out there that voting is probably not at the top of their list.
We don't send out the packets, the registration packets like it used to be, but I usually put out some communications in the fall and can work with ASUI on what those communications look like. And food usually does do a pretty good job to get students to show up to events, and we're gonna get you some better swag for your table apparently, a little bit of voter registration form. But, you know, it's one of the things that we try to do at the university, and students, you can let me know if I'm wrong on this, is we're farmers planting seeds for things to be considered about. Getting students to actually show up at any one given time is a really difficult thing to do, so we have to create multiple points of entry and multiple points of opportunity to do. That's why ongoing consistent voter drive initiatives work better than just a singular event. Because students are so busy at any time during the week, it's really difficult to get them to show up for an event for something. And so sending out an email to communicate with them, which they don't usually read a lot of my emails, but these folks do, they do a great job. But really working with student leadership to do it, talking to IFC, Panelists, the NGC councils, residence hall associations, that's how we get in front of them and engaging those leaders to help the initiatives as well too. So it's gotta be multiple. You're right, it is a short time frame. The university, we're starting the fall semester on August 19th, so we've gotten another 6 days to work on it for the fall from that. And we'll make sure you have the table also for Palooza Fest.
I'd like to reinforce that the housing
issue. I work as a poll worker at the SRC and have for several years, and in the general election, a lot of students, as they will, procrastinate and wait until election day and they go, oh, I gotta register and vote. And so there's a big long line of students that are registering and they wanna vote, and every one of them says, how can I do this faster? And I said, you could register ahead of time. It's like, well, how do I do that? And a lot of them said, if there was just somebody in my dorm on an, occasionally, it would have made all the difference for them.
Yep.
So I guess somehow League of Women Voters might try to figure out a way with the students to do some tabling at the residence halls.
We're happy to partner and work on setting those things up.
Lauren?
So it's a question for Julie. So I know the SRC has precincts for 16 and 8. What other precincts are you hoping to add for polling stations for students? And is it starting in our election in 26 days or the general election?
Can you repeat the question?
She wants to know what polling locations are now at the SRC.
Okay.
Do you remember them?
Yep, 1, 8, 13, 16, and 18.
Yeah. And it will be for the May election, so it'll be for all year.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. So does that, include like the King Street area and over that way?
Yes,
It does now?
yes.
Wonderful.
I think it includes, should have brought a precinct map. Pretty much everything on this side of town, clear, is it to Palouse River Drive? Yeah, so a lot bigger, like now, I always consider, like, it used to be professors all lived back in like Conestoga and all that, so all those are now SRC.
Yeah, Plus River Drive over to the highway, so all of that on that side.
If we can get a good PDF precinct map, or if it's on your website, and we get the link to it, we can include that in communication, that's easier to, because that I think is one of the biggest confusions for students on where to go vote.
Yeah, it's on our website, and then you can also go to Vote Idaho and it will tell you your polling location. Yeah.
Haley, did you have another question?
Oh, I was just gonna get your attention for it.
Oh, okay.
I have another question, and this is maybe for you. You were talking a little bit earlier about the difference between having something like that's on paper and physical versus the difference between having something that would be online, but mentioned that a PDF might work. Is that correct, or did I interpret that differently?
It would work, say, for someone in our office, but to go election night and go, hey, here's my phone, look at the PDF, we can't expect our poll workers to accept that kind of responsibility. So election night would need to be a physical documentation.
Got it.
And I just, not to suggest anything, but I just don't know their level of ability to do something on the phone, right? So.
Okay, gotcha.
It varies.
We'll look into that a little more. I think the phone is okay. Yeah.
Why I said it would just be the level of the poll worker, not necessarily legality of it, but the level of whether or not they're comfortable with
That's
it.
right. The reason I ask is because when we were working with polling station, Haley and I, last year, there's something where you can pull up in VandalWeb where it'll have your Vandal ID number, and Haley, maybe if you remember this too, your Vandal ID number, your name, and it's a PDF that you can get that shows up with the University of Idaho logo on it, and it's like straight from the U of I website.
Does it show your address?
It does, and that was the thing about it, because it's a housing verification thing, and it's through the University of Idaho's website.
Yeah, we had reached out to the Secretary of State.
And, well, we had talked about a spreadsheet, and they're like, no, we need to see an official documentation. So to look at it on the phone is really, to all of us, no different than looking at it on paper. Right, so a PDF on your phone is no different than me looking at this. In my mind, your mind, our mind, but some of our poll workers, and that again, like I said, but we could address that in training.
Well, next week we have training and we can address that issue.
And I can see if I can get a copy of that to send to you guys, so we can iron that out.
That would be good.
For Dean Eccles, in terms of like a get out to vote campaign, what have you seen student leaders do in the past that has worked really well in bringing students out to the polls?
Yeah, excellent question. So talking early and often, I think is one. The get out to vote, literally we've gotten golf carts where students have done golf cart driving. Let me drive you to the polls kind of situation on campus. And it was, you know, students love to be driven down a hill and even more up the hill. And so that's a great opportunity to do it. But then just being creative to get their attention to stop at the tabling. Sitting out there with the papers and talking about voter registration is one thing, but if we can work and partner and identify some good swag or good reasons, I think that's really important in identifying issues. I think more than anything, you all talking about the issues that are important to students and why they should get out and vote is absolutely critical. You can touch into that passion.
We talked in one of my classes about potentially bringing the news out to the polls to interview students after they vote, just to kind of like attract students, because I mean, who doesn't want to be in the news?
Yeah. So. We've also had good candidate voter forums. I mean, like this, we're talking, but bringing candidates to campus. We've had some really incredible informed conversations so students get to know who the folks that are running. We had one for the governors here a few years ago, and it was a fantastic forum, and I was really proud of the students that facilitated and moderated that. We had a really good turnout for students, and that gets people excited when they can connect and interact with the candidates and whatnot. And then having forums that talk about important ballot measures that are on the state initiatives or what's going on at the general. Having the dialogue is the first part, and getting people passionate about it and why they need to get out and do it is the second part. Yes, ma'am.
Did Idaho pass a rule that you can only deposit your own ballot? You can't bring in grandmas or people who don't want to go out that day? Or is that another state?
That is one that was brought up. So, ballot harvesting has been made illegal per se. However, care providers can bring in their, or you can bring in your grandmothers, but they have that limited to 6 ballots. So
are you gonna have a camera in the little box outside when people are depositing their ballots?
There is a camera in the box.
So they would count envelopes?
Well, I mean, you've seen on the news, unfortunately, in the last 2020 election, people walking up with their ballots. So if it is seen, we can definitely look at the camera. We're not gonna study the camera the whole time. Again, limited to 6, and whereas before there wasn't any code stating it was illegal to harvest ballots, there's actually, it's in the law now stating that it's illegal, and so hopefully that will help.
We do want to encourage people to follow the law, that's number one.
Right.
But using that as an issue of why people want to vote and change the laws is another reason why we want folks to get out and vote.
So if we created ASUI branded mustaches.
There you go.
Yeah, could create some cool merch next year. That's for getting out the vote.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Idea for you guys,
And I'll say, I mean, and I know that, I would imagine that most of us in this room feel very similar here, but like, encourage especially new voters that voting is fun. Like, it's fun to like get into the process, and sure, yes, I know that there can be apathy, and yes, I know that there can be a little bit of burdensome trying to figure it all out, but like, the act of like going, casting your ballot, and just kind of feeling like you have, and knowing that you have participated, is like enjoyable. Like, it's fun, and also like, I always like when they're like, Bryce Blankenship has voted. And I'm like, I have voted, dang it, right? And I feel like really good about that, right? Like, it's a cool experience, and to know that like you're in the mix with the process, and your voice, it is now being heard in ways that you hope that it gets heard. And so I think just kind of like promoting that kind of campaign, as opposed to, and I know that that's part of the campaign that would be promoted, but as opposed to like, here's step A, step B, step C, where it just feels very clunky. Like, yes, all that needs to be streamlined and ironed out and very effectively communicated, but also encouraging students to just say, this is fun, right? Like, it's fun to be involved, it's fun to participate. And again, kind of like have that amplification of that experience, I think is definitely important too. So.
And becoming a poll worker will work out some of that clunkiness.
Yeah.
Because you get to see behind the scenes. The first thing I've ever done in elections other than vote was the November election last year, and I volunteered to hand count after the election. Never done anything like that before. And it was really cool to see the behind the scenes. And as a poll worker, you get to see even more behind the scenes, how we look you up in the e-poll books, you know, how the ballots are laid out, things like that. It's one night, it's one day, or it could be multiple if you help work early voting, but it's so much, we learn so much more about the behind the scenes thing that makes it even more exciting, I think. I'm having a great time. This is my first year at Latah County, and I'm having a good time with it. It's really fun, so.
Is same-day voter registration, is that still a thing?
Yes.
And maybe a good closing one, because we're getting close to 6 o'clock here. If each of you could wave a magic wand and do something, or start an initiative, or ensure something that happens in November happens, what would it be, and how would you accomplish that? Would it be voter information, whether it be an initiative, whether it be an event, whether it be something?
So, and I was thinking about and I mean, I could take your question a lot of different directions here, Martha, but I'll stick on one that relates to the conversation that we've been having. I was thinking that because we have so much energy and so much foot traffic as of the last couple of years with the football games, if there'd be any sort of energy to table it a tailgate event, or somehow again capitalize on just that energy in the fall in some capacity, where you just have so many people that are already just generally excited, and then just be like, hey, you got 5 minutes to make sure you're registered to vote, and kind of find those opportunities that are happening just throughout the fall in general that I think we could again promote education, promote knowledge, and also get people involved and registered.
Wow, on November 5th, if I could wave a magic wand, it would definitely be that this election, not just Latah County, the United States, could go off without a hitch, and that we could know the winners of the races by election day. That would be a huge, that would be like wonderful. I mean, I'm always baffled as we get more and more technology, and it takes longer and longer to get the results from an election, so I hope it goes well.
I guess for me, I would love to see voter registration challenges, and I'm thinking the residence halls competing against other residence halls for how many students are registered on the floor, the fraternities and sororities doing the same kinds of challenges and whatnot. I think that would be an amazing experience for students to learn. It would make it fun. I mean, we all know students love challenges like that. And I'd love to find creative ways to get folks, because I think the more people that register, the more likely they are to vote. If we end up waiting till the last day, because people will do that, they get excited and they're hearing friends, now I want to go do it. But they're more likely to not do it if they're waiting till the last day. Oh, I'll do it next time around. And I think this upcoming election, for the general election, is going to be probably one of the most important in the lives of the current students that are here, quite frankly. And I really hope that they take time to learn about the issues, learn about the candidates, and really get involved and make their voice heard, regardless of how they vote. That's really important, because democracy is not a spectator sport.
Well, all of you have done an awesome job answering questions tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, ASUI, again, for all your support, partnering with us. And if you want to register to vote, we have that ability right now. We can even look up to see where you're registered. Main thing is make a plan and be prepared, because if you wait till the day of, you might not get all that paperwork Julie was talking about in front of somebody. So, and your idea of the challenge between the living rooms is awesome. So thank you so much for being here.
ASUI, we have a couple hand cards over here with the register to vote QR code. You guys would grab a couple of those on your way out and then bring them to your various living groups. And then we're all going to take a second and put this room back together too. So everybody would not leave before you do that. And grab pizza for the class. Thanks, guys.
You wanna do this?
If everyone's here, I can do it.
Yeah, Blaine has some stuff to share to ASUI real quick. Except for voting and whatnot, but it'd be easier for
Have a good one, brother. Sing Bohemian Rhapsody now for y'all. We can put the room together first and then we can talk.
Sure.
Or is this-